this is exactly what we're trying to help support people with is,
Hmm.
of them being able to have a healthy mental well-being and learn how to cope with stresses of
Hmm.
life, which quite often come with like not knowing what to do, not knowing how to make decisions, not knowing what's right for you, and also giving you the tools to see where your conditioning is and to see where your triggers could be coming from. Human design reveals who you are energetically and who you came here to be. I'm Dana, human design specialist.
And I'm Haley, the human design newbie. Listen in as we explore how leaning into your authentic self is your ultimate path to success. Welcome to the Human Design Hive podcast. Let's get into it.
Well, hello there, Haley. How you doing?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good. Good morning, and welcome back to the Human Design Hive podcast. It's another morning recording session here for more morning for Haley than for me.
Yeah,
It's a little
a
bit
little
later in
bit.
the day here, but it's the nice weekend. And have you had a good weekend so far?
Yeah, it was a fun time. Yesterday, Presley actually went and ran his 25K. So he had his
No
race
way.
yesterday. Yes. Which for
25K is what? How many miles?
16, roughly 16
Whoa.
miles. Yeah.
All at once.
Yeah, it's a lot. He thought that he was gonna do like 3 hours, around 3 hours, he thought. But it actually took him 2.5. So yeah,
Wow.
which is what his watch predicted. So that was pretty accurate. But
So where did that place him in the field?
I don't know. I don't know. They haven't posted the results yet. And it was really hard to tell because they also had a 50K and then a 4 mile and an 8 mile. Those and they kind of all started at different times, so it was hard to tell who was finishing
Hmm.
what race. So I don't really know, but he had fun. He said it was
Wow.
easy. I'm like, okay.
God, I wish I'd done something like that when I was younger. Be like, it's easy. Well, it is. He is a generator, so
Yeah.
he's probably got a lot of energy he needs to like get rid of on the daily from
Hmm.
being at his desk job all the time. Even though he's
Yeah.
working at home, he's pretty much like at the computer all the time.
Yeah.
So,
But he does like he'll stand for most of his day.
mhm.
I'm like, can't do it.
So I'm curious, does he run every day now?
He runs probably 5 days a week, I would say.
Have you
Yeah.
noticed any like mood changes? And do you feel like he's like they always say, like all that running and exercise, it's good for
Mhm.
the brain. And
Yeah.
I mean, he's never like overly emotional or anything,
No.
but does he seem a little bit more like
He seems maybe at
relaxed,
least
easygoing?
more even-tempered. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't seem to get as mad when he's playing his video games, so that's
Oh well,
that's a
there you go.
plus. Yeah, no, but he will use it sometimes to just go out and like just clear his head and just kind of
Hmm.
just like he
Hmm.
listens to books or podcasts. He doesn't listen to music, but he'll just kind of go out there and just run. Just
Because music is a waste of time, Haley. He's got to
he
be
is not
listening.
learning anything.
He's training his brain while he's training his body. He's a machine. I appreciate it. I don't like to listen to music either. I mean,
Yeah.
anymore when I'm walking, I'm just not listening to anything. I'm walking the dog and
Hmm.
just trying to like clear my head and not put
Yeah.
more in my head because I spend most of my day putting lots in my head. So I need
Yeah.
to extract. So I appreciate that. And you've picked up a new I would say a new hobby. It's not really picking it up, but you were telling me earlier you're experimenting with some other things in the kitchen that you
Oh,
made.
yes. I made bagels for the first time. Yeah. I like to bake. So, like you said, it's not a new hobby, but
Well, you made sourdough bread last week too, weren't you?
I
Like,
did. I'm gonna retry it today. Because my sourdough last week
is
didn't
that high
rise so
altitude?
much. Yeah, I gotta play with the high altitude baking, but
I did have to laugh though when you sent that Snapchat with this. So you're making these Panera knockoff cinnamon crunch bagels, which I love the
yes,
cinnamon crunch bagels.
they're so good.
And I had to laugh because of all the different things that you've been trying and experimenting with that aren't like I think we all equate the experimenting with career moves or jobs or stuff like that or relationships. And yours is just having fun playing with hobbies, seeing
Yeah,
what you like.
that is probably where I do my experimenting hobbies for sure.
Yeah. Let's see what you're good at, what you're not good at.
Hmm.
And you told me it wasn't that hard, just took 2 hours to make bagels. And I'm thinking I could get up to Panera and back definitely in like half an hour, get a bagel. But
Yeah.
all right, well, I think it's important to have hobbies. It's
Hmm.
important to get out and get some exercise. And this is my segue into today's topic because it is still May. It's still the month of May. And May is Mental Health Awareness Month or Mental Health Month, which I wonder if they just picked it because of the M.
Feel like this sounds right.
Yeah. And, I'm usually one of those that they pick a theme for a month. I don't know who picks these themes. Probably this one was picked by a like mental health organization or something
Yeah.
like that. But I was just made aware of it a couple weeks ago that May was going to be mental health month because of my guest that I had on last week, Jess Bubico, because she's a human design and Gene Keys guide, and she also wrote this book called Jessie Lou and the Magic of You, and
Mhm.
it's about a little girl with big emotions and learning how to like deal with her emotions
Mm.
and process them and not be made to feel weird for having big emotions and also so it's a really cute book. So if you want to hear more about it, you can definitely go back and listen to last week's episode with Jess. We had a really great conversation around emotional awareness, health, all that
Mhm.
stuff. So it was fun. So it got me thinking further about this theme about mental health and how I just wanted to look into some statistics like what is the current like for 2024 as close as I get, what are people struggling with the
Mhm.
most? And surprising,
Mhm.
it wasn't very surprising what the findings were. I sent them
Yeah.
to you. And what did you think?
Yeah. I mean, obviously what I was saying, the biggest one that people struggle with is anxiety. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, to me, I was like surprised, but also not surprised because it's like
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone is just very, very anxious. Like you can just kind of almost feel it sometimes, like all the shit
Mm-hmm.
that we have to deal with. And like,
Mm-hmm.
and it was also saying that like younger, what was the age group? 18 to 25 have a higher prevalence of any kind of mental illness than the older generations. And I was like, cool, cool, cool.
Hmm. Well, I always think about statistics because you can read them in so many different ways, and
Hmm.
I agree, and I'm not surprised that kids 18 to was it 26 or something like that or 27
18 and 25, I think it was.
have such high levels of anxiety. I think it's probably one of those anxiety inducing parts of your life, but also there's more the prevalence now of the quarter life crisis instead of the midlife crisis, which a
Hmm.
lot of it is around everybody doing what they said they were supposed to do, go to college and get a job. And then they go to college and they're like, where's the job? And wait a minute, I trained for this
You're
job
like, I
and I
have been
hate this
sold a
job.
lie.
Yes. And I have $50,000 in debt and can never hope to buy a house. And oh, yeah, the world is burning. So, yeah, I can understand the high levels of anxiety. And I also think that people in I'm trying to refrain from saying kids, but people in that age range these days are more acutely aware, more keenly aware
Hmm.
of their mental health. They're
Yeah.
just paying attention to it more. And a lot of it could be the last couple of years of going through COVID
Hmm.
of being in that time period and being at that age of just being more, I think, aware of it. Because people my age, 18 to, when I was in that age range, I would not have considered it a particularly stressful, anxiety inducing part of life. I just really wasn't thinking about it much at all.
Yeah.
But, and then, so what was some of because some of the statistics I got was that something like 20% of American adults, which is like more than 50 million people, experience mental illness. like
Yeah.
every year. That's a statistic according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And 5% or more encounter a more serious mental health concern. And so the top two are anxiety and depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I
Yeah.
think we could all understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And for the sake of today's conversation, because we're going to discuss it a little bit, but also we also want to talk about obviously the human design angle of it, of why I think this is relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And but oh, so we are going to just really stick to like the anxiety, the depression, stress, really.
Yeah.
And I when it like I said, when I was reading these statistics and I looked at them and it said, especially for like depression, there's a rise in the rates there, and how women are more often diagnosed with these
Yeah.
conditions than men.
What was it? It said that approximately 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men experience depression. That was the
Which I
statistic.
think is a misleading statistic again as well, because one, a lot of times men don't seek help
Mm-hmm.
for these things, and two, every time a woman goes to a doctor, she's told it's in her head a lot. Not every
Oh,
time, but you know what I mean. It's like, are they diagnosed for depression more because of symptoms that could be physiological
mm-hmm.
symptoms that doctors don't quite really
Yeah.
understand? I mean,
I mean,
Western medicine, traditional doctors don't understand the
if
complexities
you
of women.
if you look at the history of healthcare and women, like women would be just labeled as hysterical and like be in
Hmm.
hysteria and literally put into institutions
Yes, we
because they
saw
were
it.
suffering from something. And they're like, she's a crazy woman, throw her away.
We did. We remember, so years ago, this would have been like 2014, I think, when we went to Indianapolis because you
Oh
were
yeah.
still in high school.
Hmm.
And Hunter was at a band competition or something, and we went to Indianapolis. Great trip.
Yeah.
But we did go to,
It
what
was
would
so
you call that?
weird.
Was it a mental, what was it
I think,
called? A museum on mental health, or it was a very
yeah, I don't
strange thing for
remember.
us to go to, but
I mean, not for us. Like we like museums. We're gonna
we
go to
love
the weird
museums.
things, but
Yeah.
it was maybe more on the weird spectrum.
Yeah, but what was interesting, well, I was so glad we went because it
Hmm.
was this older house, like a mansion. It was kind of far removed from town. We had to go through some sketchy part
Yeah.
of town to get there. I mean,
We
we
saw a
saw a
police
police
chase.
chase while we,
Yeah.
we did. We saw, I mean, full on people on the sides of the street pointing to the cop cars, go that way, go that way. We're
Yeah.
like, are we going to die? What is
We're like,
happening
we're
here?
just trying to go to this museum.
But so we did go to the museum, and it was so interesting because it used to be part of this very large mental hospital in
Hmm.
Indianapolis, and they had some logs, that
The
like patient
records.
logs, the
Yeah.
records of the patients, the intake, outtake, or whatever. And
Hmm.
it was so sobering to see how many. It was like you just said, this woman was 30 years old and she suffered from hysteria or malaise. She was sad. And it was just like, what? A lot of it was after childbirth.
Hmm.
She couldn't snap out of it, basically. I can't remember what some of the terms were. And they put
Yeah.
them in mental
Hmm.
institutions
Hmm.
for having emotions and like
Basically, yeah.
not
For
being able to,
struggling.
for struggling with being a woman. Jesus Christ. But what was really sad was, besides that, was, I mean, it seemed to me those people were somewhat compassionate, but
Hmm.
it was that this was, like I said, a large mental hospital that in the 1980s got completely defunded under the Reagan administration, because he did that across the board with a lot of mental health care. And they shut it down and just kind of turned everybody loose. And so
Hmm.
these were unfortunately a lot of people that had serious mental issues that ended up on the streets. And I think ever since then, it's been such a problem in this country. We all know that the prevalence of homelessness is quite often attributed to mental health,
Hmm.
addiction, all these things that don't get addressed. And so it is encouraging to see the conversation being brought more to the light. And like we said, we see the statistics on younger people, and we can thank younger people for bringing this, not being ashamed to talk
Hmm.
about their mental health and what they need,
Yeah.
because it's crazy how we've just kind of ignored it and
Yeah.
just not paid attention to our overall well-being and happiness as human beings, especially in this country.
Yeah.
So I know some of the statistics you had were a little bit older because it was during COVID, but something I found that said, and this is pretty current, like within the last year, anxiety disorders at like 19%, major depression, 8% of the population, which is like 21 million people. That's a lot of people.
So much.
8% doesn't sound like a big number until you put it in
And then you
context.
put in the actual amount, and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah. And like you said, highest is from 18 to 25 and then 26 to 49 years
Hmm.
old.
Yeah. And then there was one other statistic that I want to point out here that I really kind of blew my mind is
Hmm.
that in individuals aged 10 to 19, like the overall burden of disease on individuals that age, 16% is due to mental health disorders. Like
Children.
16% of the overall in age 10 to 19 is
Hmm.
mental health. 10 to 19.
Well, they said a lot of the issues that people deal with comes from childhood traumas or things
Mhm.
like that. So it
Yeah.
is
And
quite understandable.
whenever I see that, like that young age, I just think in this country, all of the fucking school shootings. Like
Yeah.
that's where I see this anxiety and like it really breaks my heart.
Well, it's like a continual loop. I mean, there's a lot of anxiety. There's school shootings. There's anxiety because there's school shootings. There's just like the rise of social media.
Oh,
And I will say some of the things I do agree with in some more conservative circles is the breakdown of like the family unit and things like that. It is, we got some issues in this country.
hmm.
And I just wanted to touch briefly on my own experience with this because I, what led me on my whole journey, I love the word journey, towards where I am today really started with my own experience with being diagnosed with anxiety, not really depression, anxiety. I was an anxious mess for sure. This was when you were very young. And so I was just outside that 26, 27. I was close to 30, I guess, and had just ever escalating anxiety. Like, couldn't sleep, felt like crazy all the time. And I'm sorry to use the word crazy. I don't want that to be a trigger for anyone, but I just felt out of control. And it was really just this incessant, like fearful worry, continuous
Hmm.
worry. Every thought was like disaster thinking. And I just knew something was off, but I couldn't figure it out on my own.
Hmm.
And so I did go to a clinic. Like it's really frightening what kind of medical care people can get. They can get bad medical advice, good medical advice. But there was
Hmm.
this clinic at the end of the street that was like, 'cause I didn't have a primary care doctor or anything. And I now know they were like a pain clinic. I think they got shut down for
Oh.
overprescribing medication. But what did
Oh.
I know? And so I went there and I first met with a doctor
Hmm.
who, in order to diagnose me, he said to me, well, just imagine you're sitting on your front porch and your children are playing in the front yard and you hear the phone ring and you go in the other room to answer it and then you hear a scream and blah blah, blah. Like I'm like, what?
Why?
He put me into such a freaking state of distress and trauma by basically my worst case scenario was something happening to one of you two.
Yeah.
And he totally, oh, when I think about it now, it just makes me sick.
Why the
He he's like, okay, you have anxiety. I'm like, well, you just freaking stabbed
You
me
just
in
sent
my
me into
worst
a state of
fear.
panic.
I know. And he's like, I'm gonna hook you up with a therapist and some medication or whatever. And I was like, okay. I mean, like I left there crying. I was so upset because I was like,
God,
how?
what an asshole.
I know. It's terrible. I know. But it wasn't all bad. I did meet with a therapist for probably a couple months, and she was nice. She was good. But they did put me on prescription medication
Hmm.
right away. Like there was no therapy first, then see if you need it. It was like immediate. And so they put me on a some kind of, and I can't remember the name of it. It's like a not Xanax, like a Xanax or
Anti-anxiety.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you have to take every single day, right?
Hmm.
And really, we got to the root of a lot of what my anxiety was stemming from was pretty normal, I think, for a lot of young mothers was first of all, there's all this responsibility on top of you, but then you never sleep. And and I think that's what really was it was a physiological thing for me in that my brain was not producing the chemicals it needed and my adrenals were burnt out. I was just stressed and not sleeping well, and so I
Hmm.
couldn't catch up. And so what the medication does is it just like brings you at this baseline level and you can function again, right? And
Yeah.
I was probably on medication for like a year or two. I don't know how long it was. I can't
I
remember.
I like the way that you describe it. It brings you back to baseline and then you can function. Like
You can
not you're
function.
happy, you can function.
Yeah, I felt like normal again, like I wasn't spiraling into panic and I just didn't have this overall feeling all the time of like waiting for something to happen
Yeah.
and could relax a little bit. But I also was just kind of flat.
Yeah.
I remember that. And so, long story short, if I know how to do that, was that your father and I, we were always self employed and we always, we never worked for the company that gave us insurance. A lot of times we didn't have insurance.
Hmm.
And I can't remember if we had insurance at this point or not, but I just remember that we were young. We had our own little water sports business. We had two kids. We didn't have a lot of money. And I don't know what's changed. And so I was running out of my medication and it was about $100 a month. And that was like 2003, 2004. That was a lot of money.
Hmm.
And so I was kind of stressing about that, I guess a little bit. And I hadn't gotten it refilled. And I was wondering what I was going to do. And I can't remember which came first, but I do remember going off the medication, which they don't recommend, especially with depression, medication for depression. They can be very dangerous to just go cold turkey, but this wasn't so much a dangerous thing. I realized when I stopped it because I ran out, how much it was affecting my nervous system. I did not know that this, because I had been taking it for a year or two, I did not know that it was having such an impact because within like 2 or 3 days of not taking this pill, I was so paranoid. I remember I was so jumpy and paranoid. Like if something like snapped around me, I was like, my nervous system was shot.
Oh.
And I thought, I don't want to live like this. I'm only like 30 years old. And I know now what the problem is. It was lack of sleep and just daily stressors and I need to find a way to handle that. And I this is the one of a couple moments in my life where I've had that clear voice moment come to me and say, because I can always remember it. I was walking across my backyard towards the shed, and this voice said, "You can figure this out. Like, you're not, it's good for some people, but this isn't for you. Like, you can figure your shit out."
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to figure my shit out. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't know, but I just did not want to be reliant on medication
Hmm.
because while I know it can be helpful for some people, I just knew it wasn't the answer for me.
Hmm.
And it wasn't long after that, once I made that decision, that I mean, I would say not that long, but it was within several months that I met my first yoga teacher and started on that yoga journey and started learning about meditation and mindfulness and
Hmm.
breathing and really just moving the body and letting a lot of this stuff move through, but also just like that connection and being responsible, not responsible, I don't want to offend anyone, but being responsible for your own state of mind in the sense of
Hmm.
what you choose to put in, what you choose to
Yeah.
believe, all these things. So I do feel I have some little standing to be able to talk about this. I do have some understanding. And one thing I always heard, it was really interesting. They say if you suffer from anxiety, you're more likely someone who's tending to look towards the future all the time. It's
Mm,
worry.
yeah.
And depression is someone who's more looking towards the past and
Oh,
either missing something or regretting or all these other things. And I could definitely see that because your father, he tends to run more towards these depressive episodes, which I think are also situational, seasonal kind of
his
things.
emotional wave, right? Because
Yeah.
he's defined.
Yes, but
Yeah.
yeah, but just his lifestyle's work style of like intense work for 6 months out of the year and
Yeah.
then less. So it's just, it's an identity thing. It's a lot of things for him,
Hmm.
but he is someone that more pines for the past.
Hmm.
And I am someone that's more like always looking to the future. But anyway, so then everything's really changed for me thinking about human design
Hmm.
and looking at human design, like how I wish I knew this stuff back then
Hmm.
because I feel like it wouldn't have, I don't want to say taken so long because it was how I had to do it. I had to
Hmm.
learn it. I had to do it. But I also know that it would have been easier for me to see where a lot of this anxiety and fear could be hiding and understand that for me, it could just be a function of who I am. And I think it's true for a lot of people because, especially the conversation now around neurodivergence and neurotypical and all those other things, which I also see differently as we're all neurodivergent. I don't
Yeah.
know
No,
what's
what we don't
normal.
we don't all think the same. Like
Yeah.
that's I agree with you on that. Like the whole neurodivergent, neurotypical, it kind of irks me a little bit because I'm like, we're all different. None of us think exactly the same. Like we're supposed to be like that.
Yeah, I just think we're bringing it more into the conversation now
Hmm.
of these. Yeah, I think neurotypical is a lie. I think it is another one of those constraints of society that we've all felt that, or we've been told that there is a normal and there's
Hmm.
not a normal. There's just not.
Yeah.
And normal is diversity for me, I think, is everybody being
Yeah.
different, I hope, because of course I'm also someone who's never really leaned towards wanting to be
Yeah.
quote
But if
unquote
if
normal.
you look just like in straight science is the best word I can come up with. But like the continuation of a species, you want diversity. If things
You
are the
need
same,
diversity.
the species dies out because there aren't things that can help the species evolve and grow and continue. So like we want diversity. We want different things.
Yeah, and that's even built into the chart too in the channel 59.6 channel of mating. It is the friction and the intimacy. It's like the friction that channel gate 6 is like it is provoking, it is aura, it's also where diplomacy lives. It's where understanding those differences, but also welcoming those differences and being able to like work with it because that's not the route I
Mhm.
really wanted to go down into like survival of the species. But anyways,
Mhm.
so then I thought, well, we have all these mental health issues. I feel I have a way to help with human design. And then I decided to look up, well, what is mental health? Right? Like
Mhm.
what is
What's the
good mental
definition?
health?
Yeah.
Right. And so the definition I found from the World Health Organization is, quote, mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn and work well, and contribute to their community. Peak mental health is about not only avoiding conditions, but also looking after ongoing wellness and happiness. It also encompasses resilience, which is the ability to bounce back from difficult situations, even if none are currently happening.
Mhm.
And I mean, hello.
I mean, like, what are we trying to do here?
Yeah, so I mean, I always felt that system can help people in so many ways. But then when I read the definition of what like good mental health is, I was like, holy crap, this is exactly what we're trying to help support people with, is
Mm-hmm.
of them being able to have a healthy mental well-being and learn how to cope with stresses of
Mm-hmm.
life, which quite often come with like not knowing what to do, not knowing how to make decisions, not knowing what's right for you, and also giving you the tools to see where your conditioning is and to see where your triggers could be coming from and
Mm-hmm.
really how to deal with them, and to understand that a lot of these things are just a function of your energetic body, your energetic makeup, really.
Yeah.
So I thought what we could talk about is that, well, where does some of this lie? How can human design help you identify that? And obviously, to me, it's in a lot of the centers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think most importantly, one of the first things that human design absolutely can help you with is just the most basic fundamental thing of knowing your type, strategy, and authority.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the stressors or one of the mental health issues that people are dealing with is burnout,
Mm-hmm.
that anxiety and all that stuff of wondering if you're doing it right, if things are going right. Things don't seem to be going right.
Saying,
What's
"Oh,
going
I'm
on?
not contributing enough. I can't work hard enough."
Yeah,
That's
says the
mine.
projector.
That's me.
Exactly. Well, that's what I think is because, especially for the non-sacral types, the projectors, the manifestors, the reflectors who don't have
Mm-hmm.
that sustainable sacral energy all the time, that do tend to run to burnout because trying to prove you can do the
Keep up.
things or keep up. Would you, I mean, this always feels like a leading question, but I know we talk about it sometimes, but you would say that you are more at peace or more,
Oh yeah. Like, because I don't feel like I thankfully have a ton of anxiety overall, but I still get anxious about things. And one of the things that I used to really, really struggle with is feeling anxious that I wasn't doing enough, like especially around Presley, the generator. Like I felt like I
mhm,
wasn't, like he was always doing something and producing something, and I felt like I wasn't, like I was lacking. But I
mhm,
have been able to understand that no, we just work differently. Like
mhm,
I'm supposed to not be doing exactly what he's doing. Like that's not right for me. I have to do what's right for me.
mhm. And I give you credit towards learning that also, but especially in the environment you're in now, where you guys are living in a new city and you aren't surrounded by people you know, even though we can all communicate through technology,
Hmm.
but to really, you guys are in your own little two-person lab there. The
Hmm.
experiment of standing, it could be very easy to just kind of want to conform to how he does things because it might be easier for you, but I'm proud of you.
Hmm. Thanks.
So I think what might be obvious. So, with your type, strategy, and authority, I mean, that first and foremost is going to help you because it is going to help your decision making
Hmm.
process, knowing how your body feels, knowing what you need in order to make decisions that are more aligned for you, knowing how you're best meant to work, how you interact, just understanding as a generator type, you don't need to be initiating things, you can respond to things, you can
Hmm.
relax a little bit. All these things that we don't necessarily promote in our culture. It's getting better now, but that whole follow your bliss or follow your desire, what is
Hmm.
it you want to be doing? We've been told is such an irresponsible and
Yeah. You can't
indulgent,
make
selfish thing
money
to
at what
do.
you love. That's the
Yeah.
biggest thing. It's like, me.
Yeah. But I mean, here we are as people who are designed to do just that. We are all designed to find what it is that is important to us and what feels good to us and what lights us up. Like that should be the biggest motivating factor in
Hmm.
our everyday life, and we're told that that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. That's the message we get. Like I said, the tide is changing, and I am hoping to be at the forefront of that
Hmm.
conversation of no, please do not just be a cog in the wheel.
Hmm.
Because that is important to your mental health is to feel that you are contributing and that you are living life with purpose and
Yeah.
you want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
you know
What you're doing lights you up. Like it makes you happy. You want to actually be doing it.
yeah, and so tapping into your type and knowing how you're supposed to interact with the energy around you and with the universe and everyone else and how to make decisions is just going to be, first of all, a game changer in your
Hmm.
life. That one bit alone, especially if you are a non-sacral type. Well, that's not fair. I mean, it's been life changing for me as a
Hmm.
generator to
Yeah.
know I don't have to let everybody have my energy.
Yeah. And I mean, Presley, like he doesn't know a ton about human design, but he knows roughly about this the type and the strategy. And that has helped our relationship too, because he doesn't expect exactly the same from me that he would expect of himself, because he understands that that's not how it's supposed to be.
Oh, so sweet. Because at first he was just trying to figure out how to. At first with human design, he was looking at it till I remember him sitting there going, I am curious. I'm just trying to figure out how to get her to do more."
Yeah.
You're missing the point, sir. That's not the point.
Yes.
Let her be her. You be you. So, anyways, okay. So we've gotten into. I really want to look at these centers because I
Okay.
think they're so important. Obviously, we have those three awareness centers we've talked about: the spleen,
Hmm.
the ajna, and the solar plexus. And so I think number one, when it comes to anxiety, of course, we're going to be looking at our mental state, which we
Hmm.
attribute with the mind. And the ajna center is the mind. Between the head and the ajna, they
Hmm.
make up what we consider the mind. And
Hmm.
so the ajna really, I think, is more of the actual mind piece because the head only has the three gates and it's really just filtering those streams of consciousness, that
Yeah. It's more
divine,
just a receptacle.
yeah, of bringing it in either through a logical process, abstract, or through knowingness. But the ajna is where we conceptualize and we try to figure things out. It's actually
Mhm.
our literal way of thinking. And so it's always trying to make sense of things, answering questions, reasoning, finding meaning, figuring things out. And it doesn't do well with uncertainty. Like a mind,
I mean,
yeah, I mean,
that's anxiety, uncertainty.
yeah. Yeah. And whether you're defined or undefined here, it will play out a little bit differently. But this really is a center that always is wanting to make sense of things.
Mhm.
And if you have it defined, you have a more consistent way of doing that, of trying to make sense of things. And if you're undefined, it's going to be less so. Like I said, it's going to play out differently. But still, this is, we all have a mind, we all have an ajna center.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to look first of all at defined ajna because we both have defined ajnas.
Mhm.
You have defined head and ajna, and I have open head. And so, like I said, if you have definition there, you are someone who has a more consistent way of
Mhm.
processing things. Doesn't mean you don't feel your thoughts or scattered or you feel like you have control necessarily
Mhm.
over your thoughts. It just means that it's always on, right?
Yeah.
And as such, a defined ajna needs a lot of mental stimulation. I would say, needs things to focus on, to process. And so that, first of all, if you think about if a defined ajna needs that information, it needs things to be kind of working on.
Mhm. To ruminate.
Yeah, you need to choose wisely what it is
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
allowing to come in, right?
True.
Because this is a mind that's always thinking, it's a very constant,
Yeah.
active mind.
Mhm.
And when we think of how much is available to us in this day and
Yeah.
age,
I mean, I remember like in the very beginning of the pandemic, like I was so anxious and afraid because we just like all of the information we were getting, it was just it felt like no one knew. And I literally had to at one point like cut myself off from looking at that. I was like, I am just making myself anxious and scared looking at this. Like I can't look at that anymore. And I literally just had to like stop.
Yeah, well, and let's face it, the major sources of information in this country, unfortunately, is not exactly free of an agenda on either side, as far as I'm concerned, because I feel
Hmm.
like there's a lot of corporate capture in our media outlets of like choosing what it is, how we're going to think. And so you have to,
Hmm.
luckily, if you have a defined ajna, you might have a more discerning mind. You might be able to kind of pull apart what you think is truth from fiction. But then again, a defined ajna means it's not as flexible in its thinking and its way of processing. So it could
Hmm.
also do the opposite and get very narrow focused on certain things and just believe that they are right because
Hmm.
they consistently see things the same way. So that could also be a bad thing. And so it is if you're defined from your ajna, because you can be defined through the head or the throat center or both, right? But
Hmm.
if you, like yourself, if you have a defined head, you're obviously going to have a defined ajna. There's just three
Yeah,
channels there.
it has
And
to work
so,
out that way.
yeah, so for you with that definition, which yours is through the 6447, which is the more abstract thinking, that really leads to confusion in the sense that you probably need more time to make sense of things, more time
Hmm.
to, because that process of thinking is very like kind of in chunks and comes through experience, and it's not very clear what the meaning is until after it happens or after you have a time to really piece it together and kind of make sense of it. So
Hmm.
there's also the logic side, which is the 63-4, which is always trying to secure the future. It's always looking to the future. It's always like trying to find stability by being able to predict a stable future based on what they think can happen. So there's like, yeah, there's a lot of
It's a
doubt and
lofty goal,
confusion.
but mm.
Try, try. And then in the middle there, that 61-24, this is like the big mysteries of life and its knowingness and what's interesting in that channel is there never really is an answer. There can be a revelation, but it's
Mhm.
like always evolving. It's always refining. It's never like, and any of
This is
those,
it.
yeah, any of those channels, you think you have an answer, but then there's always another question.
Hmm.
And that is why I think looking at the ajna is so important, because we always think that in order to make our correct decisions or to know what's happening, that our mind has to be solid and steady. But even with definition there, it's always going to
It's
be
always changing.
questioning and moving, right? Depending, like you said,
Hmm.
on what is going there. And so, like I said, be careful about what you're putting in there and be a little more, if you're defined, be a little bit more flexibility, looking at things from all angles. And you're gonna probably have to find a way to, I would suggest like defined head and ajna to help quiet the mind more is to not really worry about sitting and being still and quiet. You might need a little bit more of a moving meditation or something that's going to help you
Hmm.
kind of slow it down a little bit. But then if you have a undefined ajna, this whole certainty thing is ramped up, this trying to find certainty. And obviously, if it is undefined, it means there is no consistent way of processing information.
Hmm.
Like an undefined ajna is literally, especially an open head in ajna, is literally an open mind. And that does not mean that it's an empty mind. It's just
Right.
open mind. It is just as busy in activity, especially around other people. Most people, I mean, you are in the majority with the defined head. I think it's like only
Oh,
30% of the population has defined head. So, because that's,
wait, you just said I'm in the majority, but only 30% of a defined
did I
head.
say majority?
You did say majority.
Sorry, you are in the minority by having
Okay.
a defined head,
Yeah.
because only about 30% of the population has defined head. And when we look at the prevalence of defined ajnas, then I think it's somewhere around 50%, somewhere around there, 47%. So it's another one of these places where there's a lot of people feeling uncertain and thinking the other people have the answers because they feel more certain in their thinking, and it's not always true.
Mhm.
So for an open ajna, it's really important to appreciate your openness in the sense that you are someone who is a little, well, is more flexible in your thinking. You might not have, I mean, you can have defined gates there,
Mhm.
but if it's generally undefined, you're going to be a little bit more flexible. But you will really struggle, usually, with feeling that you have to be certain because you feel like
Mm.
everybody else is so certain.
Right.
They feel like they know what they're talking about, they know what they're thinking. This is something your dad struggles with, especially around someone like your uncle who has defined head and ajna, who's always
Yeah.
very certain in his thinking, very certain, and can hold and retain information. Defined
Mhm.
ajna, a little bit easier. Undefined ajna is a lot harder. And this is also where I I question the prevalence of ADD
Mm.
in people because I do think it's a thing, but I also don't think it's a necessarily abnormal thing.
Right.
I mean, there's lots of factors to contribute to that because I'm like, I am the person that does not want to be labeled anything, but I do think, yes, you could, a lot of the things about AD&D, you could, AD&D, ADD, you could say about me, but
Yeah.
at the same time, maybe that's just the way my mind works. It's
Yeah.
not an issue. It's
Yeah.
a,
I mean, honestly, I feel some of those things apply to me too. Like I'll see something and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I do that." Like that's just
yeah,
normal to me. I do that.
yeah. So, anyway, so we'll get off on another topic there. We still have a few things to get through, so and I know
Yeah.
that's a big topic. But really, if you have that defined ajna, just realize that you are undefined ajna, that you are going to not necessarily have a consistent mental like groundedness, something that you can really consistently rely on. You are meant to be seeing things from all angles
Mhm.
and using your beautiful, brilliant mind to kind of take a piece of this, take a piece of that, see things differently, shake it up. But, unfortunately, people have a lot of conditioning and stigma around that of maybe not being able to retain information because they're not really designed to retain information. You're designed to look at it in different ways and come up with different ways of doing things.
Mhm.
And so they tend to feel a little flaky, or that whole ADD thing, or
Mhm.
wrestling with uncertainty and anxiety,
Mhm.
really, not knowing where to focus. So,
Mhm.
for both defined and undefined, definitely recommend finding some kind of mindfulness practice, whether that's like mindful meditation, or I even suggest hobbies that like use your hands or
Mhm.
things like that, or exercise. Those are all good things to help kind of reduce some of that mental chatter in the
Mhm.
ajna center.
Yeah. Yes.
And also, if you look at your ajna center and where you are defined or undefined, whether you have gates or not, there
Mhm.
is really looking at the themes there, which we kind of discussed. If it's open, there's this feeling and need to be certain. Go back and examine, where did this first come from? When did you start feeling this? Where is this, who's conditioned you to think this way?
Mhm.
And kind of just do a little exploring around in there. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and use your
Okay.
strategy and authority. That's going to help
Yeah.
alleviate a lot of
Mhm.
the feeling because you can't, this isn't where you make the decisions from, right?
No.
I'm pointing to
Mhm.
my head.
Yes, not a visual media.
So, where do you think another place that anxiety, particularly, would live in the chart?
I'm gonna say in my good buddy, the spleen.
Yes, your good buddy, the spleen. Yes,
Yes.
and why is that? Why do you think the spleen?
Oh, because the spleen is kind of like our body awareness. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, before we were super civilized, like it was very important that we could have this kind of quick knowingness almost and be able to recognize what would be good for us and what would not be. And the spleen hasn't quite caught up with the new times.
Well, yeah, I mean, you think it's been millennia that it's like kept us alive and
Hmm.
aware and healthy for the
Hmm.
most part. And yes, it is the center of our well being. It is where instinct lies,
Hmm.
which is, like you just said, supposed to move us towards the path of well being, what's good and what's healthy for us.
Yeah.
And because of that, what is it that has kept us alive is what? Do you have an
Intuition.
idea? Intuition
Yeah.
or a healthy, what do I say, a healthy respect or relationship with fear?
Oh, yeah. I
Is there
saw,
a healthy relationship with fear? I don't know.
yeah, just kind of a little bit of a tangent, but it was kind of interesting. It's kind of along these lines of, do you know what the uncanny valley is? Like things that
Yeah.
are just not quite human enough, but they are, and it freaks us out.
Hmm.
And I saw a thing that was basically saying, like, that is an evolutionary trait that we have acquired from
Hmm.
like way back when we needed to like truly survive. And the post or whatever posited like, what were we so afraid of that looked so much like us, but it wasn't, that we had to create this fear survival trait? And I was like, oh God, what was it?
Don't start. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be, I don't know if they ever like cohabitate like near each other. We had other species
Mhm.
of humans, I guess, is there like,
Like, but the difference between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, if I do believe,
yeah. I
are
know
the
there was
different
a
ones.
time difference there. They didn't. But then they say somewhere that they may have lived together at some
There
point
was a
or at the
Bones
same time,
episode where
not together.
there
There was
was
a what?
there was a Bones episode where they were found a
Oh,
campsite that was kind of cohabitation.
well,
There
that's
may be
clear fact.
some true backing to that.
Anyway, so fear.
Hmm.
Fear lives in the spleen because fear is what kept our ancestors alive. It is
Hmm.
what kept us able to know when we were in danger, and not even just like the you're being chased kind of thing, but I also think about our female ancestors of knowing the right plants to eat and
Hmm.
the right medicines and what would be good and what wouldn't, because I mean, they had to figure this out. It didn't come with an instruction manual. So, if you have a defined spleen, there are themes within the spleen. All the gates in the spleen each have a fear associated with it. And
Hmm.
so, it's no wonder that the spleen center could cause a lot of this anxiety or even depression because of some of these themes that run through the spleen. So, real quick, for the defined spleen, even if you have it defined or you have one of these gates defined, they're going to be more of a theme for you about what's where some of your deepest fears might actually be residing. And so in gate 48, it's the fear of not knowing enough, of
Hmm.
inadequacy. Gate 57, which is the gate of intuition, is the fear of the future. It's always like trying to be alert and aware to know what's going to happen so that you can be prepared. It's a fear of the future. Gate 44 is the fear of the past repeating itself. And that's the gate that we talk about where it's letting the tribe know it can recognize patterns from the past. It can
Hmm.
see what has happened and helps create a narrative to keep everyone safe. Lets the tribe know we need to go this direction. We need to, because we
Hmm.
don't want that to happen again.
Right.
But that becomes an irrational, unhealthy fear in this day and age of just staying stuck or in patterns of inaction because you're afraid of
Hmm.
what happened before is going to happen again. Gate 50 is the fear of responsibility in the sense of you don't want to, it's not that you don't want to be responsible. It's like you feel like such a sense of responsibility for everyone
Hmm.
around you that you fear that you're not going to be able to care for your loved ones, for your
It's
tribe.
more of fear of the failure of responsibility.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like you have such a deep sense of wanting to care for those that are in your community that you fear that you're not going to be able to do it. You can't live up to
Hmm.
it. And so that could lead to, hello, burnout. You're trying too hard
Hmm.
to take care of everyone. Gate 32 is the fear of failure and of not realizing your dreams. It's the fear of not being able to complete the job, complete the task of not being able to, like I said, realizing your dreams that you're not going to be able to do it, which can also lead to a lot of anxiety or
Mm-hmm.
other mental health issues because you're always afraid of not measuring up, of not having enough. Gate 28 is the fear of a life without meaning. And it's meant to be someone who can learn through, even when life has adversities and there's struggles, of knowing that it's worth the effort. And the fear there is like this, I think, could run more towards that depressive sense of that there's just no purpose. Life has no meaning. There's nothing worth fighting for or struggling
Mm-hmm.
for. It's just this very low energy. And then lastly, gate 18 is a fear of being judged because this carries the energy of correction, of knowing what needs to be corrected as a very discerning mind. It has a very healthy fear of authority and it doesn't like to be judged because that's what its key energy is being able to quote unquote look outwards, judge, know what needs to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like, you feeling called out?
Little bit. There's my
Yeah.
fear.
Being judged
Yeah.
and doesn't like to be told what to do. It has a healthy fear of authority because in the sense that if we just are always blindly following authority and what it tells us to, not like your personal authority, but like
Mm-hmm.
outer authority of other people, authority figures, what what can be changed, what can be approved? Well, not much if you're not questioning that authority. And so
Mm-hmm.
those are those fears there. So one of the most one of the most, let's say important, but best pieces of advice for fear. What would you think dealing with fear? What is the most important thing that you always hear about dealing with fear,
Oh, facing your fears?
facing your fears?
Okay.
Well, the big quote is feel the fear and do it anyhow, or do it anyway, right? Like
Right.
move through it.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we said, this inherent fear in here, in this center, in this energy center, is about survival as a person, as a
Mm-hmm.
human, like your actual physical survival,
Right.
which we don't have as many. I mean, we did talk about some of the things we feel like we're being threatened all the time for sure. But our day to day living, for the most part, and the majority of us listening to this podcast, we don't live in a serious survival mode,
Right.
right? It's like it feels that way. Our nervous system might feel that way. The stress that comes from always worrying and being fearful,
Mm-hmm.
trying to control your environment, definitely can feel that way. But the thing about a lot of the fears that we experience on a day to day is once you acknowledge it and decide you're going to just do it anyhow, the fear usually is dissipated quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's usually you imagine and you fear that it's going to be way worse than it actually is. Like most of the
Always.
time, it turns out perfectly fine.
Which, if you think about it, that's how the spleen speaks. We always talk about like you have splenic authority.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much in the moment
Mm-hmm.
and it just lets you know, like, hey, do this. This is healthy, or this will be good for you, or you want to go this direction. Hey, listen to me, right? It tries to
Mm-hmm.
keep you healthy. So if the voice you're always hearing is don't do this, it's fear, more fear based. You got to first of all look at that. Is it really, am I in physical danger? Is it actually something like that? Or is this just something like I'm afraid to get up and speak my mind? That's a fear of maybe the past repeating itself, or maybe it's the fear of the future, or fear of inadequacy. All these things piled into one
Mm-hmm.
can make you feel incredibly threatened, and it feels like your life may end because the level of anxiety that can come up, your heart's racing, your palms are sweating, you're ready to like run out of the room, right?
Yeah, I legitimately have that response when I have to speak up on some of my team calls that I have. I legitimately, like, my heart starts racing and I get all sweaty. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to speak my mind. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why are we reacting like this? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to be judged.
Yeah. Well, and as a projector, you may have been judged before or dealt harshly if you spoke your mind without being asked. But usually in a team call, if you've been asked to speak, you've been invited. So you should
Hmm.
be pretty clear that it's okay. You can speak your mind. They want to hear what you have to say. And being in that environment, you have to speak up, right? You have to say
Hmm.
it eventually. And then
Yeah.
what happens? Like you said.
And it's fine.
Yeah. Every time it's like I had the I don't know if someone pointed it out to me, but I remember I would always have this really anxious feeling going to a certain class with a certain teacher, yoga class.
Mm.
And it was a hard class, and I was always like so worried. But then I thought one day, I was like, someone pointed it out. Is it fear or is it excitement? Because
Mm.
sometimes it's very hard to find the difference between the two. It's all in a mindset of, are you really afraid? Is your nervous system telling you you're afraid, or are you actually excited about something?
Hmm.
Now, talking, you might not be that excited, but at the same time, it could be a little tinge of that, of like, people want to hear what I have to say and I can
Hmm.
speak now. It could be that. But it makes sense what I was saying about the fear dissipating once you move through it, because
Hmm.
as a function of the spleen, it is just a very much in the moment. And once you've passed that threshold moment of deciding to move through the fear, then it has no choice but to just be like, okay, well, that's
And it,
over. We
it
didn't
really
die.
does. It dissipates real quick.
It does. I know that feeling. We all know that feeling, I think,
Yeah.
of doing that. So
Lena's
then
like,
if
oh, well, I guess I was wrong.
So then if you have, oh, I want to say one more thing about having the
Hmm.
fear is it's Elizabeth Gilbert, who I believe in her book Big Magic talks about, because it's all about being creative and honoring that. But she said her fear, she learned, or the way she processed, I don't remember how she got here, but it was like she's decided to befriend her fear. And a lot of times, if you actually try to do that, talk to your fear, what is it? It will have something to tell you. It wants to tell you. It's just trying to keep you safe.
Hmm.
And usually it's a version of yourself that as a child that felt
Hmm.
unsafe at some point. And I know it can just make you feel so compassionate for your fear and really appreciate what it does for you, which it is trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And but she says that she has learn to acknowledge her fear, and she's likens it to like they're all in the car together, but she's now told fear, you're no longer allowed to drive the car. I'm driving the car. You can come along with us, but you have to sit in the back seat, share the snacks, but you don't get to pick anything, but you can come along for the ride. But just basically, we're not going to ignore you. It's okay, we love you, but no, you don't get to drive anymore. So I love that analogy.
That is good.
So to be mindful, if you do have a undefined spleen, of course, everything is going to feel bigger to you, more
Hmm.
amplified to you. It's going to, everybody else's fears are going to be incredibly more impactful on you. So you really have to be very discerning about where you choose to be, and also who you choose to be around and what you choose to allow to come in. Like, probably not a good idea to be on a steady diet of true crime podcasts or horror movies or watching like TV all day long with the news of telling you how awful.
Hmm.
Stay off. Be careful with your algorithms usage on TikTok, because it will just keep feeding your fears for you.
Hmm.
It will feed your fears constantly, your insecurities and your fears for everything.
Wow, isn't social media great?
I can see why it can be a detriment to social health, mental health. It can be good, but it can be
There
bad.
should be like, you can toggle a switch. It's like good, happy things only. Give me videos of animals
That's,
befriending unlikely friendships. We need that
yes,
toggle.
there is a toggle. I mean, that's pretty much my toggle, because you just interact with more cat videos and you'll just get more cat videos.
I love cat videos.
They always make me happy.
They're so good. They're so
Oh,
silly.
gosh. Yes. So, anyhow, it's just paying attention to your definition there and the spleen,
Hmm.
understanding the function of the spleen as far as your physical health, and you learning to have a healthy relationship with fear is going to help your well being over time for
Hmm.
sure. And really, for both, it's funny because I was going to do a wrap up, but it's of like at the end, but I feel it's appropriate for each thing that really, or each center we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It's learning to find ways to regulate your nervous system, whether it's through movement, through breath work, all these things that really help is like being more conscious of what you
Mm-hmm.
choose to pay attention to. I mean, it's basic mindfulness tenets and everything. So, in this one in particular, just like we said, witnessing the fear, letting it move through you. They say a lot of times in this center as well, some energy work, energy healing, those kind of things would be good to help
Mm-hmm.
regulate this center as well. Because a lot of times you just need to have your overall system kind of calm down a little bit. And maybe if you're not able to do that on your own, getting a Reiki session, maybe getting some acupuncture if you
Mm-hmm.
can, those kind of things. So, anyways,
Yeah.
so really the last one I really want to focus on, there's we could probably find something in every center for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but is in your, obviously in your solar plexus definition. This is where we differentiate. I'm defined, you're undefined, the solar
Correct.
plexus. And so as the defined person, we know that I'm going to have an emotional wave. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
naturally have ups and downs in my mood. For me, it's not particularly high spikes or anything like that. It's very low. It's usually my relationships, but it is really just a function of my energy. And I, Jesse, or not Jesse, Jess and I spoke about this last week about when you have emotional definition, emotional authority, you kind of you set the emotional tone in the
Mm-hmm.
room, and which was a huge revelation, but also something, like I said, I learned earlier in life too, because not in life, in my parenting
Journey.
life. Yeah. Because that time when I was having all those issues with anxiety and everything in my emotions, I knew I was over top emotion. I was angry, I was scared, I was all these things, and it really hurt me to know that I was probably hurting my children by yelling, or I never wanted to, like, when I heard myself yelling sometimes I was like, oh my god, what am I doing to my children? Once I was started to have this awareness that everything you guys are experiencing is like imprinting on you at a young age, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my god, I've got to like get a handle on this as best as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And because thank god, because you are emotionally undefined.
Yeah.
And
Are we both? Me and Ian both?
no, he's defined.
Oh.
It's just
I'm the
you.
odd one out in the whole family.
Mm,
Everyone else is
yeah.
mostly defined. And I'm the
Yeah, man.
projector. Good
You're
gosh.
you're a little guide. So, real quick, there's also fears that live in the solar plexus, and which we don't talk about too much, but I think they're important to kind of
Yeah.
touch on. So, gate six fears a desire. So, usually, what it wants is also what it fears. So, it's like
Makes sense.
gate six desires intimacy and connection. So, it then fears being vulnerable, which is important to being creating
Kind of need.
intimacy. Is
Yep.
you have to be vulnerable,
Yeah,
right?
you do.
Gate 37 is in that channel of community. It reaches up to the will center. It desires to belong to a community. So it fears, but there's a reciprocal thing of like, you do for me, I'll do for you. So it fears that its needs won't be met. So
Mm-hmm.
it can kind of hold back because it fears that it's not going to get what it needs. Gate 22 connects to the throat. It has a desire to be heard. So it has a fear of not being heard,
Mm-hmm.
of not being received. So that can also cause some, I think in the solar plexus, these fears tend to run more towards that emotional spectrum of probably more depression, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm
You're not a
speculating. I don't
doctor.
have a not a doctor. Gate 36 desires new experiences. And so it has a fear of inadequacy. And they say, especially in like sexual relationships, there's a fear of inadequacy here because there's a lot of kind of that passion, and because it's a continuation there of like thrill and passion and adventure and excitement and all these other things. They might feel inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
Gate 55 is desire to It says a desire to experience spirit through your passions. Like that's a way of getting there. It's like it's the gate of abundance, gate of spirit. And so
Mhm.
there is a fear there of not knowing what passions to follow, not knowing what's going to help you feel that connection
Hmm.
to spirit and experiencing your spirit. And then lastly, gate 30 is a desire. It is the gate of desire and passion, desire to feel. And so to have the experience, to be like really
Mhm.
excited and wanting to go through it. And so there's a fear of feeling.
Mhm.
It's kind of shutting down all the feelings. And if you have this gate in your chart, it's always noted that gate 30 kind of ramps up all the energies. In this case, could be fears in your chart as well. So
Cool.
taking a look at that to see the connections there. But so emotionally defined people, like I said, we have these emotions, but we find that we're a little bit more quote unquote comfortable with our emotions. We understand we are emotional, even if you don't have knowledge of human design.
Mhm.
It's like, you know, that sometimes you're sad, sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're just blue. It's like you understand that, whereas undefined people are feeling those emotions more intensely from those around them. And so it can feel a little more erratic depending on who you're around, the intensity of your emotions and where they're coming from. Like I said, this is always like I find when doing readings for people who are emotionally undefined, and this is their first introduction to that, that it is so like revealing to them a lot of their journey of how they've experienced life, especially in their families, and how they were raised or treated in their family as to be the more erratic and all over the place and dramatic and all these things person when they were actually the ones designed to be the least. But they're just picking up everybody's stuff.
Yeah.
So, one thing I always want to say is just because you're undefined again does not mean you don't have emotions.
Correct.
You don't have feelings. You do have them. You are
Mhm.
just learning about them through other people's feelings as well, how or emotions, I should say, how they're experiencing them. And understand, I mean, I feel like you tell me because you are undefined.
Mhm.
I imagine it like being able to try all the flavors you experience
Mhm.
in all of them, right? But if you have a understanding of this, you get to, I think, more clearly or more definitively decide and choose how you want to feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to kind of, and to be fair, I haven't been around a lot of people lately, so
Yes.
I
It's
kind
good.
of I
It's
live with
okay.
my emotionally undefined husband, so
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't have to deal with that. But I think maybe a way to explain it is when you're like at an ice cream counter and you can do a little sample of the ice cream
Mm-hmm.
instead of just committing to a whole scoop of an ice cream. I
Mm.
think that's kind of how you can look at it because I can be around other people and sample their emotional wave, their emotional energy, and then decide if I want to stay in it or if I want to remove myself,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., get the ice cream cone or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely think you've done that even before you had any understanding of this. You just, which is common for undefined emotional people, emotionally undefined people, is to either just like avoid it, stay away from it, or try to change it by trying to make people happier,
Mhm.
make them less angry, make things by
I
changing
do
who you are.
do try to do that.
People pleasing. Well, I mean, I have a tendency to want to make people feel better too. I think we
Mhm.
all do, especially when, I mean, you think like, well, this is easy enough to kind of shift this a little bit, have a little laugh.
Mhm.
But one thing we talked about with Jess was that studies show that an actual emotion, these feelings that we have, really pass through the body rather quickly. And it's really our need to kind of, I don't want to say need, that's the wrong thing to say. Identifying with it is what intensifies it or keeps
Mhm.
it hanging around longer because it's like
Mm.
60
Yeah.
to 90 seconds of feeling an emotion and letting it move through, like acknowledging it, feeling its intensity, not running away from it, not trying to change it, not trying to identify it, like literally
Mm.
feel it in your body. Where are you feeling it? It goes away,
Mm.
right? The intensity of it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times it is the same thing, acknowledging it and then allowing it to be, seeing what it feels like, and then movement helps a lot. You'll see a lot. I don't know if you've been seeing it on your social media. There's a new trend towards this somatic movement
Mm.
of dealing with emotions and stuff. Yeah, we're starting to understand more that there is this real connection between like actually physically moving your body and help
Mm-hmm.
move that emotional energy as you do
Mm.
so. That's again the qigong, yoga, dancing, any
Mm-hmm.
of these things that actually like
Well,
move your body.
that you mentioned dancing, and that was something that just popped in my head. There has been more recent studies that one of the most effective treatments for, I don't know if it's just specifically depression or if it is a little bit more widely, and this
Hmm.
is even over medication, is dancing. Like
Hmm.
that can be one of the most effective treatments, is just dancing.
Hmm. Dancing and this goes back to the spleen too, shaking, like doing things that causes your body to like move. You ever do to just like kind of like wiggle and shake your body can also help dissipate
Mhm.
some of these things, because again that's something that happens when we're scared. You can shake. It's like
Yeah.
all that energy just wants to like,
It's like I
really
gotta
it
get
wants to
out.
propel you across the field, but you generally were just like, no, I just got to stop shaking because everybody will see me. But like allowing it to move. So
Mhm.
I mean, you've got an Apple Watch, I got an Apple Watch. I've got mine set to tell me every hour that I need to get up if I haven't been,
Mhm.
especially if you're a
Time to
generator. You
stand.
got to move your body. But I in researching this topic, I found a few things that were really interesting, helpful tools. If you struggle with meditating or any of that stuff, of course, there's all kinds of apps out there that can help you
Mhm.
now. Whether you want like a guided meditation or you just need some relaxing music or
Mhm.
some of the binaural beats, all these things that you can
Mhm.
work with. But I found this app and I think this was really cool for emotion, especially emotionally defined people, because it could help you track your emotional
Mm.
wave in a sense. But it's called Baseline, and it's a free app because I think it's developed by a nonprofit.
Mm.
And so, oh, actually, it just came up. It's asking me what's happening right now. So basically, what it is, you can set it to, they recommend like at least 2 to 4 times a day. Have it send you a notification to check in
Oh.
with it and see how you're feeling right now and to journal about it in your
Oh yeah.
phone. And so I can't type that much. So I've just been speaking into it. What are you feeling right now? So I have it set to like maybe an hour after I wake up, around right now, later in my day, and then later in the evening. And you also like rate it on a scale of 5 out of 5, how you're feeling. You can add
Mm.
pictures, but it's really just showing you and trying to get you in the habit of like
Like
not just
checking in.
going on, yeah, not going on autopilot and just
Mhm.
pushing through your day, but saying, how am I feeling? And you could have it ask you that every hour if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But what's cool is if you, for those emotionally defined people who are having trouble figuring out their wave or, blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
is it can show you in graph form and everything how
Oh.
you rate yourself, that you can see. I think I'm really excited to try it for a month or so, see if I notice if you can see a pattern
Mhm.
of where your fluctuations are and everything. But it's also, like you said, just good to be checking it. So that's called
Yeah.
Baseline app.
Mm.
So
Cool.
that's a good thing too. And so one last note on the solar plexus here is that if you're emotionally undefined, best piece of advice, you're doing really good at it, is to be the screen and not the sponge, meaning
Mhm.
things are designed to move through you. And so you just allow it to move through, get a flavor of it, understand it, allow it to pass through. Don't hold on to it like a sponge and soak it all up and feel that it's
Mhm.
yours. And that's good for anybody, but especially if you
Yeah.
are emotionally
Mhm.
undefined.
Yes.
And so those are really the main ones I wanted to tap on today. Obviously, you could look at the root center because it's where our adrenaline is, but it's such a big topic there. But I think a lot of what we talked about today tapped on really
Mhm.
just noticing where these might be and what your definition is, and I mean, overall, I think the most important thing is awareness, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
hiding from it.
Yeah.
Mindfulness, breathing, moving your body.
Yeah.
And I hate to oversimplify it, but I mean, it's been what's helped me. And I know there's lots of different, not levels, but,
Intensities.
experiences of intensity. Like we said, I am not a doctor. I've never professed to be. This is my experience. This is my
Mm-hmm.
understanding. This is my point of view of where I think a lot of people fall is in this kind of median range where it is manageable. Life is really hard, especially right now. It's confusing. There's a lot going on in the world. There are definitely some existential crises out there. There is things we really should be concerned with, but I also believe 100% that for every person that starts to do this, like, quote unquote, work of
Mm-hmm.
taking care of their own selves, tending their own garden, creating a different experience in the world, one that is more hopeful, more balanced, more,
Joyful.
yeah.
Happy.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be happy. I'm not happy all the time, that's for sure.
No.
But just
No
like
one is. That's
intentional,
annoying.
let's say, about how we want to, instead of just letting the world have its way with us, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, of because we definitely do get to choose our experience, even if we are struggling with mental health.
I mean, our perceptions are reality.
Exactly, 100%. So I hope that this is received in the manner of which it was intended, which was to be helpful and
Mm-hmm.
respectful of everyone out there in your experience, and to know that this is something that can be managed if you're in that range of
Mm-hmm.
where it's not some of those other very more serious
Mm-hmm.
mental health issues.
Yeah. And
Okay. Yes.
and we're not alone. We're all here together. No
We're
one's
all
alone.
here. We're all here. You have us. We'll listen. we're here to we're here to help you. If you
Mm-hmm.
need a hand, let us know. And also, if you are curious about a lot of these things we were talking about today, and if you feel like you would like some more insight into your own chart, if it was, I know it's a lot of information we kind of threw out there at once. Obviously, you can always connect with me anytime to book a reading with me, help walk you through your chart, give you a little bit of advice. Any of the readings I have, it's really a chance for you to have a conversation with me about you and about what it is you need or what you're asking about,
Mm-hmm.
and doing what we can in that hour to help kind of illuminate some of those areas and maybe get you feeling a little bit better and appreciating your unique design and who you are, and that you're not meant to be like everybody else. There
Nope.
is no normal. And I think my spot in this world is to encourage you to, I'm going to say it, let that freak flag fly in the sense that be you, warts and all. And, that's part of your mental health, is understanding who you are and embracing it. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm going to leave it.
Okay.
Okay, so you know what that means, Haley? It's time for.
The incarnation cross of the week.
That is correct. Incarnation Cross the Week. So every episode, we have decided to share with you a little synopsis of the Incarnation Cross. There's
Mm-hmm.
192 crosses, and that's a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
we're just picking one a week to highlight.
Mm-hmm.
And in case you don't know, the Incarnation Cross is derived by the top four placement, or top two placements on both sides of your chart. So it's your sun and earth on both personality and design side. And
Yes.
so this week we're going to be looking at the right angle cross of Eden 3.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have this cross, it means that your personality sun is in gate 6, gate of friction.
Okay.
Your personality earth is in gate 36, gate of crisis.
Yeah.
And then on the design side, your sun gate is in gate 12, gate of caution. And then your earth gate is gate 11, gate of ideas.
So we got
Mm,
friction, crisis,
crisis.
caution, and ideas.
Yeah.
Okay. See where this goes.
See where this goes. Okay. All right. So if you were born under the right angle cross of Eden 3, that means that also I should say that means you have a profile line, which is a starts with either 1, 2, 3, or you're a 4-6 profile.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Means your journey is a more personal journey.
Yes.
Okay. So if you have this cross, your role is to help others accept who they truly are, even when they encounter difficulties. It's important to see each challenge as a chance to learn more about oneself and to grow. You encourage others to seek out what makes them happy and fulfilled and to share that joy with others. Your mission also involves seeking out new ideas and innovative approaches that challenge the status quo and expand what people think is possible. By sharing your own experiences, you can motivate others. You trust in a deep, trust in your deeper intuition and break away from restrictive thoughts to achieve extraordinary things. That is the right angle cross of Eden.
I think it's kind of fitting for our episode as
Kind of
well.
fitting.
Kind
Kind
of
of fit.
fitting. Yes.
That's right. So we appreciate you listening and coming to our little corner of the world today and allowing us to speak our minds, share what we believe to be true, and being open minded. And make sure as you go through the rest of your day, the rest of your month, the rest of your year, to be looking after your own mental health. And hopefully, some of the things that we talked about today could help you kind of sort that out. So, appreciate you being here. And till next time, Haley, bye for now.
Bye.
Well, you made it all the way to the end of today's episode, so you must have liked what you heard. If you did, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode, and perhaps leave us a good review. And if you know someone who wants to dig into all things human design with us, make sure you share the Human Design Hive podcast with them. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for listening.